I went to Mexico in September of 2020 with Rick Grenell to meet with representatives of the Maduro regime. And the message then was very clear. Leave now, leave with whoever you want, leave with as much as you want, but leave.
Erik Prince rompió su silencio tras reunión entre Richard Grenell y Nicolás Maduro. Vamos a escuchar esta entrevista de Erik Prince, ya casi Venezuela.
On President Trump's behalf, as the special envoy for special missions, went to meet with Maduro, and he wanted to deliver a message, which is, you're going to receive back Venezuelan illegal immigrants from us. He got an agreement from Maduro to provide the transportation vehicles, the planes, to do so. And Rick Grenell also flew back from Venezuela with 6 captives, American citizens who were hostages in Venezuela. And all of that was about pressuring Maduro to accept these illegal immigrants back. Your reaction, Erik?
So I went to Mexico in September of 2020 with Rick Grenell to meet with representatives of the Maduro regime. And the message then was very clear. Leave now, leave with whoever you want, leave with as much as you want, but leave. And the Maduro clan stayed and watched. And of course, that message of strength was undone by Bill Richardson, who said, well, the Bidens will be much more reasonable on all this and softer. And so the Maduro regime stayed around for another 4 years, and they lost an election this last summer, which they ignored. They lost it 70 to 30%. Okay, they lost by 40 points, and now they're clinging to power. And of course, they've emptied their jails, and their gang members are up operating all through the United States, including in Washington, New York, Boston, and Denver. And so these are the ones that ICE and CBP are wrapping up to send back. Maduro is got to be in a very compliant mode, because he realizes the amount of wrath that Trump has on this immigration issue. The hostages, and it's accurate to call them hostages. They were not legitimate prisoners. Those are people that are grabbed for really nonsense reasons by the Maduro regime as a tool, as a pawn to barter back in exactly situations like just happened. And it speaks to the illegitimacy of the Maduro regime. And counter to that is the likes of Chevron and Harry Sargent, who still have licenses left over from the Biden regime, where they're pumping Venezuelan money, Venezuelan oil, making enormous amounts of money, hundreds of millions of dollars per month. And they're spreading that money around Washington, trying to buy influence and patience for the Maduro regime to stay so that they can continue to pump oil, to the detriment of the 25 or 30 million Venezuelan people that voted for freedom, and that freedom has so far been denied. So it'd be interesting to see. I hope Rick was able to deliver that message that it is time to go. I hope Maduro is planning on making an exit plan right now. But my concern is that that mean tweets and sanctions might not be enough to move the Maduro regime down the road. So again, it will be an interesting next 9 months of American foreign policy.
And in the meantime, Maduro has no choice but to play ball in hopes that he gets more time in his dictatorial role.
I would say it's I call it the shits method: show interest, then stall, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Time for a major analysis in our hemisphere here, especially in Central and South America. Donald Trump is working with blinding speed. I have to tell you, Erik, I spoke a number of times in recent months about how fast Donald Trump would work here on Off Leash. I discussed it. I mentioned it. And I got to tell you, he has far exceeded my expectations. I thought he would work with the speed of thunder. He has worked with the speed of lightning. Matter of fact, faster than the speed of sound, faster than the speed of light. We've never seen anything like it. The power he's using, the leverage he's using is incredible. And, not least of which here in Central and South America. Let me go through, Erik, a number of examples and get your reaction. It's breathtaking, jaw-dropping, the speed with which things are happening. Washington doesn't work that way, by the way. They'll talk about something, they'll talk it to death, they'll put a commission together, and then they'll just forget about it. Donald Trump is making a difference within hours, what usually takes years. First example, his threat of tariffs of 25% on Canada and Mexico. He said, we're going to put these tariffs in place unless you help us secure the border and end the crisis of fentanyl coming across our border. You got 25% on every product. And what we've said here many times and recently is the Canadian and the Mexican economies would die without access to U.S. markets. And there you go. The president of Mexico folds within hours and promises 10,000 troops on our southern border. Your reaction to this first, Erik?
Yeah, before even that, even the deal with Mexico and Canada, of course, you had Colombia. You had the president, Petro, who is a communist, former member of M19, their communist youth organization in Colombia in the 80s. And he loudly professed that he was not going to be taking any criminal deportees back from the United States back to Colombia. And I think between the fifth and the ninth hole, while Trump is playing golf, he announces all the sanctions he's going to put on Colombia. And Petro called back by the ninth hole and relented on everything, and including sending the presidential aircraft from Colombia to pick up the criminals in the United States to take them back to the United States. It is such an opposite approach to the normal DC way of things, because any other administration would have had a 6-month back and forth hand-wringing process of idiot committees going back and forth and managing a message and all this incrementalism and proceduralism. And instead, Trump swings a very big stick, right? What did Teddy Roosevelt say? Speak softly, carry a big stick. I think Trump speaks loudly and carries a bigger stick. And clearly, Colombia yielded on that. And yes, Canada and Mexico did as well, both over border security, because there's a lot of fentanyl and there's a lot of illegal migrants that come across from both countries. I think Canada agreed to like $2.5 billion new spend in border security to declare the cartels as terrorist organizations. And I think Mexico even agreed to allowing U.S. military to start gathering intelligence and to even operate against the cartels. And I think within 24 hours of that happening, there was a U.S. Air Force electronic warfare signals intelligence airplane, a rivet joint, flying in Mexican airspace, listening to the cartel's chatter. So this is an amazing turn of events, and clearly an acceleration like a Formula One dragster of foreign policy in a way that I don't think we've ever seen in America.
Yeah, and he's got the left and the media, they don't even know what to do. I mean, they can't even scramble fast enough to react or respond because the president is signing executive orders in the morning. He's meeting and talking with world leaders in the afternoon. In the evening, he's delivering a speech or he's issuing Truth Social posts talking about tariffs and delivering them. It is blinding speed. Mexico folded quickly. And I imagine, Erik, to be able to take out the cartels the way he'd like to, it wouldn't hurt if we had a good relationship between him and the Mexican president so we can coordinate military action with their consent.
Yeah, but the cartels are the true alternate power in Mexico, the power behind the throne. She's elected with their concurrence. And so it's a delicate, very difficult position for her to be in. But again, it is absolutely the right policy of the United States, and we would be doing 95% of Mexican society a huge favor by mauling the cartels and severely reducing their role in Mexican society. But I think it's also important for America to take a look at ourselves culturally, that as long as there is that demand signal for meth and for coke and for all the other nonsense, Mexican society pays for our bad drug habits in the United States. And I also feel, I feel the frustration of the Mexican people to say, would you stop buying this stuff and empowering these jackasses, which are terrorizing the society? The cartels, because it is an illegal business, they can't litigate their commercial disputes. They litigate them by chopping the heads off of opposing gang members or gang members' families, and much to the detriment of Mexican society. You know, I feel the worst of all for local and state level cops in Mexico, because within days of them being on a job somewhere, they're visited by some interlocutor from the cartel, and they say, you know, plomo y plato. Sorry, plato y plomo. Silver or lead. Take our money or we'll kill you. And we'll not only kill you, but we'll kill your family first, and we'll kill them in front of you so that you see them die. That is an awful place for them to be in. And so there's even been talk. Senator Lee from Utah, a great constitutional thinker, has refloated the idea of using something that's already in our Constitution called a letter of marque and reprisal, which would effectively allow the U.S. government to issue a hunting license to private organizations to go after cartel assets and degrade their capability and to really seize their money. Effectively be a very, very aggressive tax on it. Privateering like that was used extensively during the American Revolution, War of 1812, even during the American Civil War, to go after enemy shipping, where you'd actually give the ship captain a hunting license to go after certain targets. They'd have to post a bond, which means they'd basically have insurance, and they would agree to certain rules of engagement. It is a novel idea, and I think a good idea, because an all government, all the time solution to go after cartels will end up being very expensive, very misguided, and the cartels will find a way to maneuver inside of that very slow, ponderous bureaucracy. So again, interesting times, and probably not a great time to be a cartel guy.
Well, let's go to another example of the Trump effect. You know, as you know, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, they are acting swiftly to deport criminal illegal aliens, particularly murderers and rapists, from our cities. And within 24 hours of Trump taking office, the first flights were leaving the U.S., returning some of these criminals back to where they came from. And so a big focus, of course, is these countries receiving back their bad guys from us. Case in point is Venezuela. Now, obviously, we've covered extensively here on Off Leash Maduro's clinging to power. Rick Grenell, an amazing diplomat, and on President Trump's behalf as the special envoy for special missions, went to meet with Maduro, and he wanted to deliver a message, which is, you're going to receive back Venezuelan illegal immigrants from us. He got an agreement from Maduro to provide the transportation vehicles, the planes, to do so. And Rick Grenell also flew back from Venezuela with 6 captives, American citizens who were hostages in Venezuela. And all of that was about pressuring Maduro to accept these illegal immigrants back. Your reaction, Erik?
So I went to Mexico in September of 2020 with Rick Grenell to meet with representatives of the Maduro regime. And the message then was very clear. Leave now, leave with whoever you want, leave with as much as you want, but leave. And the Maduro clan stayed and watched. And of course, that message of strength was undone by Bill Richardson, who said, well, the Bidens will be much more reasonable on all this and softer. And so the Maduro regime stayed around for another 4 years, and they lost an election this last summer, which they ignored. They lost it 70 to 30%. Okay, they lost by 40 points, and now they're clinging to power. And of course, they've emptied their jails, and their gang members are up operating all through the United States, including in Washington, New York, Boston, and Denver. And so these are the ones that ICE and CBP are wrapping up to send back. Maduro is got to be in a very compliant compliant mode because he realizes the amount of wrath that Trump has on this immigration issue. The hostages, and it's accurate to call them hostages. They were not legitimate prisoners. Those are people that are grabbed for really nonsense reasons by the Maduro regime as a tool, as a pawn to barter back in exactly situations like just happened. And it speaks to the illegitimacy of the Maduro regime. And counter to that is the likes of Chevron and Harry Sargent, who still have licenses left over from the Biden regime, where they're pumping Venezuelan money, Venezuelan oil, making enormous amounts of money, hundreds of millions of dollars per month. And they're spreading that money around Washington, trying to buy influence and patience for the Maduro regime to stay so that they can continue to pump oil to the detriment of the 25 or 30 million Venezuelan people that voted for freedom, and that freedom has so far been denied. So it'd be interesting to see. I hope Rick was able to deliver that message that it is time to go. I hope Maduro is planning on making an exit plan right now. But my concern is that that mean tweets and sanctions might not be enough to move the Maduro regime down the road. So again, it will be an interesting next 9 months of American foreign policy.
And in the meantime, Maduro has no choice but to play ball in hopes that he gets more time in his
correct
dictatorial role.
I would say it's I call it the shits method: show interest, then stall, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Next example with the Trump effect, of course, is El Salvador, Eric, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio just made a fascinating visit with President Bukele. And of course, here on Off Leash, we know you gave us a full report of your visit last fall to Bukele's prison in El Salvador. And you had come up with an idea that you circulated around Washington about El Salvador taking on American prisoners at a much reduced cost. Of course, Rubio was there to talk about El Salvador taking on illegal immigrants that were deporting El Salvadorans. He'll even take Venezuelans and gang members. But then the conversation expanded from there with an amazing agreement that Marco Rubio reached with Bukele. You were the guy who came up with the idea. I'd love to hear your ideas, your reaction to this visit by Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I visited the Seacock prison. I think it's the Center for Counterterrorism, because they regarded the onslaught of the MS-13 gangs as actual terrorism and a threat to the nation. And so what did he do? He said, he was elected to the first term 5-6 years ago on a law and order stability mandate. And he locked up all the gang members and built this prison. And they got very good at building prisons. They built that big Seacock facility in about 7 months. And so, yeah, the idea that they could expand it to take on some of the worst of Americans or other criminal illegal aliens that their original country of origin won't take back as a placeholder, as a temporary holding area, made a lot of sense. And I'm glad that deal's been conducted. And good on Secretary Rubio for and good on President Bukele for working together on that. That makes a ton of sense. The issue of putting them at Gitmo is Gitmo does not have a lot of real estate, and they don't have a wastewater treatment plant. And, the average human being uses between 12 and 18 gallons of water per day, even if you're a prisoner, times, 60,000 people that they wanted to put. So that's 720,000 gallons and their
right.
cost. So literally all the wastewater that's generated on Gitmo has to be put back onto a barge and taken somewhere else to be processed at a cost of $3.40 a gallon. So yeah, the Gitmo cost just to deal with all the sewage becomes horrifically expensive, and so this is a much better idea of doing it in El Salvador, and that's a serious country with serious understanding of dealing with prisoners and dealing with security and making them realize the error of their ways. Yeah, when I visited that prison ward, and you see all the tatted up gang members, and they are all very docile. and very much under control. You don't see any of the kind of prison gang influence. There's no leader even amongst the prisoners anymore because the prison guards do not respect any hierarchy amongst the prisoners at all. They are all lowest of the low. As should
You
be.
talk about a policy of emasculation of these gang members, and it's so fascinating to me. El Salvador is becoming such a key partner for us, especially with our illegal immigration crisis and problem that Donald Trump is swiftly addressing. By the way, taking Border Patrol encounters from 2,000 encounters a day in the waning days of the Biden administration down to 100 per day under Donald Trump shows you that was a choice that they opened the border. But on El Salvador, what's fascinating to me is that it costs us $42,000 a year to house a prisoner in America. He says, hell, I'll do it for $10,000, save you a ton of money, and that's a lot of money for us down here in El Salvador.
I think the real number is much higher than 42,000, Mark.
I'll bet. And that's extraordinary burden on the American taxpayer. Let's let El Salvador take them. I love that. Sticking with the Trump effect, Erik, the next one, of course, is Panama, which President Trump started talking about, early on in his transition about how the Panamanians who got this beautiful canal that we built for them with a lot of American treasure and blood 100 years ago, and yet, because of the Road and Belt Initiative from China, Panama is completely conflicted. There's even a story that said that there are signs in Chinese all throughout the Panama Canal region. And Marco Rubio visited there as well. And looks like he's gotten the Panamanians to back off of China. What's your reaction to that?
Well, really, if you think about the importance of the Panama Canal as a means of rapidly moving vessels from the Atlantic area to the Pacific, if America has a security challenge in the Pacific Ocean, we need to be able to move vessels rapidly. Currently, the Panama Canal is pretty much managed by Chinese state-owned companies. So you can imagine the detriment of our vessels or the reliable operation of the Panama Canal. That's precisely what Trump was concerned about. And hopefully, after Secretary Rubio's visit and some stout diplomacy, they've realized that change needs to be made immediately and are doing so. So again, as we've seen, Trump goes into a negotiating position with a very hard ask, knowing that instead of getting 25% of what he wants, he goes with a very hard ask and he winds up with 75% of what he wants, and he ends up 50 points ahead. It is a fantastic master stroke, and what a contrast of that kind of diplomacy versus Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken's, very limp-wristed approach to life and to diplomacy.
Yeah, just like Washington and the establishment, that neocons that have put us in this position over the last 40 years, as we've talked about here at length. There are two places below our border, Erik, that I want to touch on where the Trump effect, hasn't been felt quite yet. Certainly it will, but we've got an election in Ecuador, which we've covered here on Off Leash, which is going to be quite consequential in a country that's really rather important for our strategic interests. Give me your reaction and thoughts on Ecuador as this election approaches.
First round of elections is on February 9. Candidate, a right-of-center candidate, Daniel Noboa, who was elected in a special election just over a year ago because the previous guy was going to be impeached, and his opponent is a very left-wing woman, literally a surrogate, the baby mama of Rafael Correa, a now convicted leftist socialist who stole a lot of money and ran up I think a $14 or $16 billion debt with China, who kicked out the U.S. from a counter-drug radar position. He's basically done all the wrong things Correa has, and now he's running the mother of one of his children as the surrogate in this election. So it is very much it's almost like Chavismo of Venezuela is on the ballot again, and the socialist rot of leftism hopefully does not make a reoccurrence in Ecuador on 9 February.
Yeah, indeed. Finally, with sort of the pre-Trump effect, we've got, massive humanitarian crisis in Haiti that you've filled us in on before. Where are we today in Haiti? What's the latest?
Well, the gangs continue to gain in power and to ravage a society that is just exhausted. There's still 10 to 12 million Haitians there, and they are truly ravaged by a few thousand highly criminal gang members. It is a troubled society that's given over almost half to voodoo. So if you are in Port-au-Prince or in the environs at night, you can actually hear voodoo chants up in the hills surrounding the area. So it is a sobering place. The light of good is slowly being extinguished by a lot of evil going on. The one Trump effect I would say that is a short-term positive is one of the dumbest ideas of the Biden administration was to send Kenyan troops to try to be peacekeepers in Haiti. So the idea of sending Swahili-speaking black guys 7,000 miles away to an island that speaks Creole, French, in the Caribbean has got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And they've been completely ineffective. There were supposed to be 2,000 of them. They were probably paid. Kenya was probably paid for 2,000 of them, but only 400 showed up. And they never left their base at the airport. So spinning an enormous cost with zero effect. And Trump just announced that they're cutting off the funding for that mission. I think it's good because it's absolutely more good money thrown after completely ineffective policies. From the time the earthquake there 10, 12 years ago, the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation have been on a grifting racket of stealing enormous amounts of money that was raised for actual humanitarian assistance. They have locked up a lot of the best concessions for gold and other resources in the rural areas of Haiti. And it is sadly a country that is continued to suffer and spiral. And it's like the United States fertilizes weeds. And when I say that, the worst aspects of USAID and waste gets amplified with more and more money, undercutting any semblance of civil society. And so hopefully there's some different innovation coming to Haiti, which will take the gang members down a few notches so that civil society can reemerge in Haiti. And I feel terrible for the 12 million Haitians who actually deserve better than to be ruled by cannibal criminal gangs.
Yeah, and to accentuate your point, over 360,000 people have been internally displaced with overcrowded conditions, limited access to basic services like water and sanitation. They are facing one of the most severe food insecurity crises in the world, with nearly half the population grappling with starvation. And of course, that's been worsened by the gangs blocking ports and limiting food imports. And finally, the violence has disrupted healthcare and education, with hospitals and schools closing intermittently, and a cholera outbreak, which began late in 2022, continues to strain the health system 2 years later. Last word on this topic, Erik.
Yeah, whether it's hospitals, any source of goodness and light seems to get pillaged and targeted by the gangs. And so until the gangs are put on their back foot and literally prevented from that kind of terror, you have to treat it almost like an insurgency. This is a criminal level pervasive insurgency which buys and it's also a nexus of massive drug trafficking of drugs coming out of Venezuela in South America, transited through Haiti up into the United States. And so it is a nexus of all kinds of bad actors. And I hope Haiti can get the help they need, because the poor people of Haiti deserve better. Look, I think the prime minister is trying to take some different steps to do it. But again, the State Department has stuck the country with a very convoluted presidential council, with every rival politician being represented in this presidential council. And it's it's not necessarily been the recipe for success. And I hope the U.S. appoints a serious ambassador, not some other career diplomat, to fix these problems, because it matters.
Yeah.
Because a completely failed Haiti, which is not far from being a completely failed Haiti, will become another realm of Russia or China and the malign permanent influence they can have there.
Yeah. Well, look, the message to people in Haiti, and I hope and pray that this Trump effect reaches them soon, and Ecuador and elsewhere. But based on this analysis, the Trump effect is real, it's powerful, and it's swift. Buckle up, because more to come from Donald Trump as he upends the world order and the status quo. That's it for us here on Off Leash with Erik Prince. Don't forget to go to unplug.com/off-leash for your unplugged phone today. Until next time.
Muy bien, hemos escuchado entonces esta entrevista en el cual ha hecho impactante revelación. Erik Prince ha contado cuando viajó en 2020 a México junto con Richard Grenell a reunirse con el régimen de Nicolás Maduro, y lo que le dijeron es impresionante: te tienes que ir, vete con quien quieras y con cuanto quieras, pero tienes que irte. Importante revelación que ha realizado. 5 años han pasado de este encuentro, ¿no? Este encuentro con Richard Grenell, también Erik Prince, con el régimen de Nicolás Maduro. Entonces, este año hubo un segundo encuentro entre Richard Grenell y el régimen de Nicolás Maduro. Entonces, Richard Grenell con esto ya conocía al régimen de Nicolás Maduro y sabía cómo negociar con él, ¿no? Porque en 2020 pensamos que habrá hecho un negocio, habrá negociado con Nicolás Maduro. No sabemos, es lo que ha contado Erik Prince, quien también habló sobre romper el silencio tras la reunión entre Richard Grenell y Nicolás Maduro. Erik Prince, el fundador de Blackwater, rompió su silencio durante esta entrevista en la cual se refirió a esta polémica reunión entre el diplomático estadounidense Richard Grenell y Nicolás Maduro en el Palacio de Miraflores. Ha mencionado: espero que Richard haya podido transmitir ese mensaje de que es hora de irse. Espero que Maduro esté planeando su salida ahora mismo, comentó Erik Prince durante esta entrevista. Según el criterio de Erik Prince, los norteamericanos detenidos en Venezuela son personas que son capturadas por razones realmente absurdas por el régimen de Maduro, como una herramienta, como peón para poder volver a entrar en situaciones exactamente como las que acaban de suceder, y eso habla de su ilegitimidad del régimen. Recordar que la ONG venezolana estimó que al menos hay 7 detenidos más con nacionalidad estadounidense, un total de 54 extranjeros. Con la visita de Grenell a Maduro se consumó la liberación de 6 rehenes de Estados Unidos. Maduro tiene que estar en un modo obediente porque se da cuenta de la cantidad de ira que Trump tiene sobre este tema de la inmigración, apuntó Prince. También expresó su preocupación sobre el papel de las petroleras como Chevron en Venezuela. En su opinión, se está repartiendo ese dinero en Washington, tratando de comprar influencia y paciencia para que el régimen de Maduro se quede y pueda seguir bombeando petróleo en detrimento de 25 a 30 millones de venezolanos que votaron por la libertad, esa libertad que ahora les han negado. Entonces Erik Prince ha revelado que espera que Richard Grenell le haya dicho a Maduro que es hora de irse, ¿no? Entonces este fue el pronunciamiento de Erik Prince, quien también recordó que en septiembre de 2020 acompañó a Grenell a un viaje a México para reunirse secretamente con el régimen de Nicolás Maduro. Reveló que en esa oportunidad el mensaje fue muy claro: váyanse ahora, ¿no? Entonces es el mensaje que ha dado Erik Prince. Importante revelación de quien impulsó ya casi Venezuela y también el fundador de Blackwater. Ha enviado su esperanza de que el pueblo venezolano por fin pueda tener libertad, ¿no? Entonces destacó también, analizó que con el regreso de Trump a la Casa Blanca, Maduro tiene que estar en este modo obediente porque se da cuenta de lo que es capaz de hacer Donald Trump sobre estos temas, ¿no? Entonces es la noticia.